Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Starfleet. The Shadow's Maw. I'm your host, Marcus Shadow. Yeah, we're a week late. We had some things pop up and inabilities to actually record this on the night we were supposed to. But hey, it's still Monday night, and it's still in June, so we're still technically legal. But yes, this is the year of Trek on Shadow's Maw, and we're looking to wrap up the original series here. At least in my opinion, it's the wrap up for the original series with Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. And of course, joining me, we have James Phoenix.
Hello.
And Chriz the Mole.
Actually, I believe you'll find I'm Colonel Mole, my ancestor.
Indeed.
Nice.
Well, welcome to Starfleet Headquarters, Colonel.
It felt relevant with this film. I had to do it.
Indeed. But yes, we actually have one more video that we're going to film, more than likely between this one and Generations, if not after Generations, but it will be in the month of July, and we're going to be taking a look at Star Trek the Animated Series on the Mole Hole.
Yep.
So be on the lookout for that, and that'll close out the original series for us. But today we're talking Star Trek VI. This is my second favorite Star Trek movie of all time, and my favorite Star Trek original series movie of all time. Basically, this is the pre-Khitomer Accords, which is kind of weird. It's the Khitomer Accords that kind of led to the truce between the Klingon Empire and the Federation, not the Duras decided to be a dick and side with the Romulans Khitomer Accords.
Well, strictly speaking, this isn't the Accords. This was just the event known as an event known as Khitomer, but it was not strictly the Khitomer Accords.
Fair enough. I do stand corrected.
To my knowledge,
yes,
anyway.
Yes. But it's basically the Klingon Moon Praxis blows up. They seek assistance because, that kind of fucked up the Klingon Empire, and the Federation's like, we better help them. And Spock, in his infinite wisdom, decides to volunteer Kirk in the Enterprise. Kirk's like, the fuck are you doing? And so Kirk and the Enterprise go out to meet the Chancellor and supposed to escort him to... Well, it's not Khitomer at that point. It's just the peace talks, because they don't change it to Khitomer until after the Chancellor gets assassinated. And Kirk and McCoy are the ones that are that people are saying have done it. And so they stand trial in Klingon court. Their appointed lawyer is General Worf, the grandfather or great-grandfather of Commander Worf.
Colonel Worf. That was
Is it
why
Colonel?
I made the joke at the beginning.
Fair enough. Couldn't remember what his rank was. But yes, this Worf, he's actually played by Michael Dorn. And they, of course, because it's a Klingon court, they are found guilty, and they are sent to Rura Pente, Klingon penal colony, ice planet. And, of course, they do break out and figure out who actually killed the Chancellor, and with the help of Captain Hikaru Sulu of the USS Excelsior, they find out that the treaty is going to be signed at Camp Khitomer. They changed it after, all the shit that went down, and of course, the bad guys are going to be trying to stop the peace treaty there. So the Enterprise and Excelsior go over there, whoop all kinds of ass, save the day, and there's peace between Klingons and the Federation, ushering in the next generation.
Yep.
Overall, a good movie. Like I said, it's my favorite original series movie. To me, of all the original series ones, this is the one that most felt like Star Trek to me. And I just thought overall it was just generally well written. The characters were very well written, very three-dimensional. I liked pretty much all the main characters in this. I thought they were all well done. This movie introduces Kim Cattrall, who went on to Sex and the City, among other things, as Valeris.
Yep. This is also the film where wasn't she supposed to have taken some sort of nude photo or something on the Enterprise bridge? And apparently Leonard Nimoy ripped up all the negatives and the photos and shit, saying it hurt the brand of Star Trek.
Really? I hadn't heard about that one. Interesting.
Yeah,
I assume it was this one, as this was the only one I think she's in.
Yes, this is the only one Kim Cattrall.
I hadn't heard that either, but fair enough.
You learn something new every day. And then this one also introduces the great thespian Christopher Plummer as General Chang, the Klingon general, the bad guy. And I really liked him as General Chang because he wasn't your stereotypical Klingon, but he still felt Klingon to me, despite the fact that he was all like Shakespearean and shit because Christopher Plummer. But I don't know, it worked.
It's also because a lot of this film has Shakespeare throughout the whole thing. Like lots of stuff has something to do with Shakespeare throughout all of it, which that makes it awesome. And like I said, in my opinion, this film is even though the next film is technically, this film is the bridge between old and new.
Yes, I can agree with that.
It doesn't feel like Star Trek to me because it doesn't feel like the original series. However, it does feel like the new Star Trek from Next Generation, but not as boring as they became in Voyager, because they actually have three-dimensional characters here, and they deal with shit like prejudice against Klingons and stuff like the race stuff, which worked for like stuff like X-Men, and it brings it forward to like the same thing. Like anyone can imagine themselves. If they're like a different race or a different sexual preference, they can imagine that same hatred towards them. Or if you don't, people have had those prejudices, and it makes it a little human, which is pretty cool instead of the typical, oh yeah, we're at the USS Enterprise, and oh yeah, we're the fucking flawless Federation with absolutely no faults like they were in Voyager and shit like that. Yeah. It's like, no.
Yeah.
In all fairness, that's how Gene Roddenberry wrote it. That was his intent. Was that by that point in the future, humanity would have overcome all of the petty shit that we deal with now, and that they would have reached that kind of futuristic nirvana where they could go out in peace and everybody got along and shit. That was his entire purpose in writing Star Trek.
Right, and by the 24th century, that happened. But the 23rd century, not so much.
Yeah, but the thing with that, Jim, is Star Trek, like with the time it came out, while he may have wrote it with that intent, things do change with each era, and Star Trek was always about looking to the future and seeing ourselves in the future. Like when the original show was, it's right when space is all new and cool, and people are like, oh my god, what's out there? It's a whole adventure. Around the time of this and Next Gen, the way we'd see ourselves in there is to deal with our issues there, because space has all been done. And I think that's what makes it cool, because it's like look at Spider-Man. Spider-Man evolved over the years, and yes, we know bad stuff. Ha 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 ha. Disney. Let's not make those comments. Spider-Man evolved, so did X-Men and stuff like that. From way beyond the point in which Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and people like that wrote characters like Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and stuff like that to now. But they have to, because that's what makes the media grow, and that's what Star Trek does, is it adapts.
Yeah, and also what he did was correct. You said, Jim, that Gene Roddenberry wrote this with the intent of showing that humans had overcome their prejudices and there's like no racism and stuff in the future. You watch Star Trek, there is none on Earth among the humans, but there's still racial and special prejudices across the galaxy. It just the prejudice transfers, and that's what you're showing. And you also have to realize when Star Trek was originally conceived and produced and stuff, it was like in the middle of the Cold War, and if you read the base descriptions of what Star Trek was, it was the Cold War in space. That was his entire intent.
Well, yeah, so I'm fully aware of that. Believe me.
Yeah. So. It was brilliant that he did it that way, because he could put the prejudices in without sullying what he viewed as where humans should be, which is, like I said, humans overcoming their own prejudices amongst each other. But the fact that remains that prejudice will always remain as long as there is intelligent life, which I think was very smart of him to do that.
Mm.
Yeah, and it also makes real sense for the prejudice and stuff because of stuff like, obviously, if they're at war with nothing but the Klingons, eventually, when that war ends, there would be prejudice. People wouldn't trust them because they were just at war for them, which is what he wrote about them being at war. But what I meant by the flawless Federation is, like I said, like in Voyager and stuff like, I say Voyager more because fuck that show, but they were so fucking like two-dimensionally perfect. Like there was almost no flaw they could have. Whereas this one, you see, and especially with the original series, because of how Kirk was written and stuff like that, but more so in this film, you don't see Kirk as being like the Janeway who has like nearly all the answers all the time, is always correct, and has always got humanity's best interest. No, he's got prejudices. He's got faults like everyone else. He's, as Kirk himself would say, human.
Yes, this is true. Yeah, at the end of the day, a human is going to be a human. It's just you're going to see that humanity, rise differently in the future than you are here because it's just going to be transferred to different, I guess, targets.
Yep.
But speaking on prejudices and racism and stuff, an interesting little fact. Great actor Brock Peters, who played, I believe his character was like Admiral Cartwright or something like that. But he also went on later in his life to play Benjamin Sisko's father in DS9. In this movie, he played, like I said, Admiral Cartwright or whatever his character's name was, the Black Admiral, and it was the one that he was the one that showed the racial prejudices of the Federation against the Klingons and stuff. And the fun fact with this one is that was incredibly hard for him to shoot because he himself, number one, he's a black man. Number two, I think he was like NAACP, and he had done a lot of like anti-racism stuff, and he had dealt with, given the era in which he grew up, he dealt with that stuff a lot, so he was very sensitive to that stuff. And so having to shoot that scene where he basically has to go full-on, racist bigot against the Klingons, very difficult for him to shoot. So hard, in fact, that I believe the one take where he actually got through all his lines and actually, shot the entire scene, that's the take that's in the movie, because they were like, yeah, we're not going to have him do that again. He actually fucking got through it. We're done. Moving on. Because they knew how hard it was for him. And it's a brilliant performance. And they were very patient with him. He had tons of takes to do it because he just could not get through the scene because the lines were that distasteful to him. And I think, if I recall, they even offered him, they even said, hey, we realize this is really difficult for you. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. We can, change it or whatever. And Brock Peters turned around and said, no, I'm going to do this because this is a great character, and this is great for this character, and it would be great for me to do just because of who I am. I'm going to do this, and I appreciate you guys giving me an out, but I'm going to do this. So it was Brock Peters himself who made sure he went through and did this, and I believe he even said after the fact that he was glad that he did it and he was proud of it, that he did this role and said those lines in this role.
And cool. Although I was going to say, I don't know if you agree or not, Jim, but was any of that a little hilarious to you?
Little.
Was it the same part as me? The part where Marcus talks in depth about how this guy was sensitive to being like to racial stuff while identifying as, the black one.
Well, I couldn't remember the name, and he's literally like the only black admiral in the movie. So I'm like, well, if he's a black guy, they're gonna know who he is because he's the only black guy there.
I know, but it's just really funny.
It doesn't make it any better to say it that way.
Yeah, he's sensitive about all these issues, and that black guy, because he's a black man. It's like, no, this is kind of undoing the point. But I will say, because I know Jim likes to Google stuff, just because I want to make sure for the audience, was my fact right earlier?
Which fact?
The nude picture.
I don't know, but I will find out.
Yeah,
it might not have been nude. It might have just been slightly tasteful. No,
might have been risque. Yeah. Also, for the record, I will go to my point earlier. The only reason that any of that stuff you mentioned happened was because some of the writers and producers forced it on Roddenberry. And there's been tons and tons of stories of people who have lined up to talk about how Roddenberry made them change scripts and make them not nearly as good because he refused to put a what's the word I'm looking for? he refused to put any kind of a fog on the glimmer that was the perfection of humanity, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of scripts that were drastically changed, and writers talk about how hell it was to work with him because he shot down anything that involved conflict amongst the crew.
Yeah, which, can I just talk about how perfect that is?
Sure.
He wants to avoid racism by showing how perfect humanity is, almost like a Superman, as people have said before now, like the Nazi stereotype.
Mm.
And then they go
What?
to war with a rival race that looks different, in itself making humanity the racists.
Well, no, one of the writers actually brought that up and made the point that the problem is they wanted to make this humanity this perfect thing, but they had permission for all the alien races to be all corrupt, ingredient, violent, and all the flaws that humanity didn't have anymore, and that the humanity was supposed to show up and save them. And the exact quote the writer had was something to the effect of talk about the white man's burden.
Yeah, that's kind of ironic.
Yeah, the writer actually one of the writer was actually Harlan Ellison, one of science fiction's most well-known writers. He published his the original version of he wrote City on the Edge of Forever, if you don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, which it
And,
does make sense, because obviously, like you said, Gene wanted to show humanity was united together, but writing science fiction, you need some sort of villain, and the only way you can do that is to have an alien. But it just becomes funny that essentially, like, oh, here's humanity all perfect with its federation marching in line as a super race, and then we have the alien races like Klingons who have very ethnic looking skin and stuff like that, suddenly in like slums.
Yeah, especially with the TV series when it was just black guys or white guys in blackface with like Mongolian mustaches and shit.
Yep. Now I suppose it was slightly less racist as they had a black and Asian person on the crew, but still, the point remains it becomes a little racist without meaning to. But that's the problem, which ironically is facing today. Of people are going so politically correct, it's becoming unpolitically correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the whole thing of like films keep doing like now, if we must have a film that's all for this demographic so we don't seem racist, or sexist, and in doing so, you alienate the other one and become sexist or racist towards them.
Yep.
I'd also like to point out in terms of Star Trek, Star Trek 6 marks the first time in Star Trek history that they show the Kobayashi Maru.
Huh.
Yep. They've mentioned it before. I mean, they've obviously mentioned many times, like through the series and stuff, about how, about Kirk and the Kobayashi Maru. In fact, I believe there was even an episode called Kobayashi Maru, but I don't think they actually showed the Kobayashi Maru test. I believe that one was more about the ship Kobayashi Maru, if I recall.
Nice.
But I believe Star Trek 6 is the first time they actually show the test, like pretty much the full test, the fabled no-win scenario.
Right. But yes, according to Wikipedia here, one of her best-known film roles is that of Lieutenant Valeris in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Cattrall assisted in developing the character by designing her own hairstyle and even helped come up with the name. Near the end of filming, Cattrall had a photographer shoot a roll of film on the Enterprise bridge set in which she wore nothing but her Vulcan ears. After finding out about the unauthorized photo session, Leonard Nimoy had the film destroyed.
Boom! I don't know why I'd heard about that, but I'd heard about that.
Well, if the citation for that particular fact is correct, you apparently read about it in Femme Fatale's magazine, issue summer 1992, Hollywood's Most Voluptuous Vulcan.
I have never read that.
It was probably a news story somewhere.
Well, I will say, I've mentioned this in the past, I have watched Sex and the City. It might have been in one of the things like factoids that they do and stuff.
That is possible, yes.
Like a behind-the-scenes thing, talking to Kim Cattrall. You might have heard it like in an interview with her, like she might have mentioned it or something.
She might have, or like I said, it could have been like factoids to do with Sex and the City, like factoids about Samantha, did you know, blah, 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 and then the Star Trek crap. But still, I thought it was a little interesting. It does show that he was dedicated to the brand.
Yep. I also believe this is the first time in Star Trek, and I could be wrong, but I believe that's the first time in Star Trek that they introduced the concept of half breeds with the half. Well, I mean, aside from Next Gen,
Spock.
obviously Worf, but I mean specifically with the half Romulan because Valeris.
Spock.
Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it.
Spock, dipshit.
Oh, true. Well,
That's
okay,
what
half
I've
Romulan.
been saying. I've been saying Spock.
Sorry. You're right, Spock. But like half Romulan, I think she's the first half Romulan because I believe this was, and I could be wrong, and Jim could look this up. I believe this was before the Next Gen episode where they tackled the same thing.
I'm gonna say technically yes, but technically no, because as I remember, and it's here on the Shadows More, going all the way back to when they had the weird Vulcan lady in number 2 or 3 that was acting really weirdly. She was originally supposed to be half Romulan, half Vulcan.
Yeah, this was the character that she was supposed to be, and they decided not to use her. You are correct.
Anyway,
Yeah,
what episode were you referring to?
I don't remember what the name of it was, but it was that it was that doctor that everyone thought was Vulcan, and then it turns out his grandfather was like Romulan, and they thought he was a spy, but he wasn't.
Oh, right, where that bitch was sort of persecuting people on the Enterprise. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that came out after this one. I think Valeris was the first ever half Romulan in Star Trek, but I could be wrong.
I also love the fact when we had Colonel Worf, he doesn't. They didn't just make him look like Worf. It was the same actor, but he looked like a different Klingon.
Yeah, which made sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but in stuff like this before now, you'd think, especially with how shitty the CGI and effects were in this, it's passable at best. Like, they cut a lot of budget on some stuff, but you would think they would just put him in his same stuff just to try and get the point across that he's related.
True.
You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, he looks like him. Like, how many times have you seen an actor in a film or a TV show or something playing like their ancestor or something, and it's just themselves, but in a slightly different outfit, or with slightly different hair or something? Like, even Back to the Future did that.
Yeah.
For the record, that episode aired 7 months before the movie came out.
Okay, I stand corrected then.
Because the movie hit theaters in December 6, 1991. The episode, entitled "The Drumhead," which for the record is episode 21 of season 4, first aired April 29th of 1991.
However, as it takes longer to write a movie than it does a TV show, it does stand to reason maybe they communicated towards each other at the same time. And we're like, okay, well, if you're going to tackle it there, and this is going to be after that, we should probably tackle it in ours too, just to make sure it matches up.
True. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's possible the Next Gen one was inspired by this version. So yeah, fair enough.
I assume they were worked on by the same people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so not necessarily the same exact writers and stuff. I assume they work together very closely because Worf.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe didn't the Okudas work on this one, Jim?
Yep.
What?
Let me see here. Let me take a look here. If there's a casting on here, I don't even know.
But yeah, I don't know. I just really liked that. I don't know if I like the fact that Sulu was on the Excelsior at this point. I mean, it was cool to see him as captain, but I was like, I kind of want to see him on the Enterprise, and especially, and this kind of hurt, especially at the end when they do that beautiful shot of the entire bridge, and like Uhura puts her earpiece down and gets up, and a couple of the cast move around to get that beautiful just cast shot of everybody on the bridge, but Sulu's not there because he's on the Excelsior, and I was just like, oh, Sulu needs to be there.
But I reckon maybe they did that for something else.
Oh?
Well, like I said, maybe they were talking to the Next Gen stuff and all that, and I seem to remember with Next Gen, it's been a while since I saw it, but I seem to remember for the longest time there was all that talk about Riker going off on his own, and that was a thread throughout the whole series for a while, and therefore maybe they wanted to show that someone from another Enterprise has done it, especially considering they've talked in Next Gen about other people doing it. Maybe they wanted to show someone else do it, and it's like Sulu's going on his own. He still respects his old crew, but this is him getting his recognition for what he deserves. Because at the same time, we also saw technically kind of Captain Spock.
Yes. Oh no, I don't have a problem with him being on the Excelsior and getting his own ship and stuff. I'm just saying it felt kind of weird, and it made me go, pain. Just when knowing that they set that shot up because they knew this was going to be the last movie and they wanted the entire Enterprise crew there, and Sulu's not there. It's just like, oh, come on, final shot. Sulu needs to be there.
I was just making the point. Maybe that's why they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, for the record, that was in the next gen thing. That was actually something that the writers have commented on that in regards to, because I read an article the other day because it's like the 25th anniversary of the Best of Both Worlds or something like that.
Okay.
And I was reading an article about it somewhere along the way, and they were talking about how they realized how ridiculous this was. What they had to write the first two seasons through the first 2 to 3 seasons or so, and it all about Riker's goal is he wants to have his own ship, he wants to be his own captain, and then when Best of Both Worlds came around, he gets the opportunity and he has to turn around and say, no, I'm not ready, I want to stay in first officer. It was like a total about face for the character.
Oh. Yeah, kind of.
Kind of.
What were you asking me about?
I said kind of, although because he does get there eventually, it could be the fact that when he gets the opportunity, he sort of chokes. Like, people do that all the time. Like, you finally get an opportunity and you're like, oh god, and then your fears just kick in of maybe I'm not ready. Which would make him human.
Well, I think the other thing, at least this is what I got, and I know we're going for a little next-gen tangent, but this is kind of what I felt with Best of Both Worlds, is that, he was being offered, like, captain of the Enterprise kind of thing, or even afterwards being offered a captaincy when Picard comes back, and realizing that leaving the crew and the ship in the hands of like someone like Shelby or something isn't, to borrow a phrase from WWE, isn't what's best for business.
Don't you mean beast for business?
I stand corrected, beast for business, yes. But yeah, I think what it is that he still wants that captaincy, but he realized that his place is there with his crew.
Which is fine, but that wasn't what I was referring to. You have to remember, yeah, that'll happen after the fact, but the whole thing started when, at the beginning of part 1, Riker's offered a command, and he's having this big philosophical debate as to whether to take it or not, and that's where he starts his hesitation about taking it. So it was before any of that shit happened. Yes, that shit influenced his decision, but he was already having doubts before that.
So it does stand by what I said, of maybe it was just like when you get the opportunity, you choke.
He choked a little bit. He didn't have the confidence to go through with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Marcus, what were you asking me about?
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, Marcus, what were you asking me about this movie? Well, Marcus asked me to look something up. I'm just trying to find out what it was so I can look it up.
I don't remember. You were looking up the next gen thing, but you found that.
No, but you were telling me that wasn't somebody involved in this movie or something about this one or something.
Oh, I thought maybe the Okudas had been involved with Star Trek 6. I couldn't remember if they had or not.
Let me scroll down here to the crew.
Because I do seem to remember reading or hearing something about them being involved.
Live people.
But
I would imagine they were.
Yeah, I would imagine so too. But I also would like to talk about another part that kind of made this feel like Star Trek, and it made it feel more like Star Trek than the other movies in the franchise. And that's the whimsy with this one, because there was humor, but it wasn't over-the-top humor a lot of the times. It wasn't really, really forced humor. I felt a lot of the humor was done tastefully, and most of it was genuinely funny.
Yeah, it's like I said, this is what bridges the gap, because like original Star Trek was campy, and it was still fun, but it was campy. This was written like sort of like the original crew, but written like next gen.
A little bit, yeah. It still retained some of its campiness. That's why to me it still felt like original series, but yeah, it wasn't as over the top campy as the original series. Like you said, it was more next gen in terms of the tone, which I like.
Yeah,
next gen is my favorite series.
See, like I said, I like next gen. I really do. It's probably my favorite, but I don't want the original series to be next gen, because the original series is the original series. I like the original series for how it was, if that makes sense. Like, just for being it. They
Right.
changed it too much to the point where I'll admit this film didn't feel like the original.
Fair enough.
For the record, yes, the Okudas were involved in the production, or at the very least, Michael was.
Cool. That's what I thought. Yeah, no, I really like this movie, just from the writing to the characters to just the look and tone of the movie. I thought was great.
I also have a suggestion.
Mhm.
And something I am going to throw out to James Phoenix.
Okay.
2, just to make it easier, or 2 or 3, depending on which one you want to do, or just one. Layer it, not what you call it, countdowns at the end of Year at the Track, in which we put the movies in our favourite order. Just to sort of bookmark the whole thing, so it's like, okay, so when we get to the end, we can actually say, okay, this is how we wrote. Like, if you wanted to go with the original series, although you'd probably want to include the Abrams one, because it's either original and Abrams, or it's original and next gen and Abrams, because either way, Abrams isn't enough for a list unless it's a list.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is given the fact that there are 12 movies, and the fact that there is so much overcross. If I'm going to do that, I'd probably just do one. I'd probably just do one final countdown, and we would just rank the 12 movies just in a row. At the very last month, we're just 12.
By the time we do final countdown, there will be 13.
Why would there be 13?
Because isn't there already 12? I thought.
Yes, there's already 12.
11.
There's already 12. The 13th comes out next year. That's the reason for
I thought it was coming out this Christmas. My bad.
No.
No, it's coming out next year, so we were like, okay, for this year, this is the last year. There's ever 12.
Okay, fair enough.
But it does make sense to also do one, because to be fair, it'll be a longer video, but at the same time, we don't have to talk about the films as much because we already did it on here.
Absolutely.
Boom.
I'd be all for that. What do you think, Jim?
But I didn't know if Jim wanted to do it as either December or if he wants to do it like beginning of next year, because I didn't know if December you'd want to do a Christmas list. Or you could always do 2 countdowns.
Yeah, well, we can always do it either way. The next movie doesn't come out until July, so we have until July 2016 to figure it out.
Oh,
yeah, but I think he was thinking it would just bookmark the end of the year track, is what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, we could do that, or we could just do that as an episode of Lair of the Phoenix or something. I mean, just as a separate thing.
We could discuss that later. We have all summer to discuss that crap, but I think that's a good idea.
By the way, I just found out here. I didn't know this. Anybody's interested to know? Apparently, the name of the movie coming out next year is going to be Star Trek Beyond.
Okay then.
Cool.
But
Neat.
yeah, I think I've said pretty much my piece for Star Trek 6. It's a great movie with great characters.
Though I don't know if I like that title.
Yeah.
Only because to me, and this may sound weird, that doesn't sound like Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's like they're always like Star Trek, like besides like Insurrection and Nemesis, most of them have been names like this one of The Undiscovered Country or Into Darkness. You know what I mean? They're sort of like
First Contact,
multiple words.
Yeah. Well, it is noted here that name is registered with the Motion Picture Association of America. However, Bad Robot, Abrams' production company, does have a habit of registering fake names to throw people off, so it's entirely possible that that's not 100%.
I thought Abrams wasn't doing it.
His production company is still doing it. He's just not.
Ah, okay. Fair enough.
Which means they'll team up with Abrams, who's doing films for Disney, and they will make it Star Trek Infinity and Beyond.
Ha!
Thank you.
Star Trek to Infinity and Beyond. A Star Trek crossover with Buzz Lightyear.
Well, he was a member of Star Command.
Yes, he was. Yeah, was there anything either of you wished to mention before we go into our final thoughts?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I just will say that yeah. I mean, I just felt like yeah. Yeah, well, one of the things I didn't want to mention, I like about this movie as opposed to the other one, is it opposed to some of the previous ones, is this one felt more like any of the others, like there was actually something going on. It felt
Okay.
like there was actually more plot to it, and like I think it had maybe a little bit of a faster pace. With a lot of the earlier films, I felt like those films were dragging on, or there wasn't enough action around to keep an interest in it. It was just kind of whereas this one, I felt like there was a lot going on. It was enough to keep at least me interested, as opposed to some of the earlier films. It just felt like, I'm just trying to get through this. That one, I actually like. I got into it. I wanted to, see the resolution to. It was really good. So I don't know whether that was the pacing or the writing or what it was, but something about this particular film compared to the others felt like it had more substance to it.
Yep. I will say this one more than some of the other ones as well, which I was going to add. I don't know. I can't remember when Gene Roddenberry died or when he stopped being involved in Star Trek, but was he involved in this one?
Yes. He
Okay.
didn't stop or pass away until near the end of Next Generation. So yeah.
Cool.
That's a lie.
I thought he died in the second half of Next Gen.
Wait, he's going to read Wiki in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
He died October 24th of 1991. Next Gen hit the airwaves in 87, so 88, 89, 90, 91. He died in season 4. About halfway.
Which was about halfway through, which was what I said. Yeah.
Which was 2 months before this movie came out. So I'm pretty sure he wasn't in good enough health to actually work on this movie.
He was probably involved in it. He just probably never saw it to completion.
Considering it takes like 2 years or so to make a film, he could have been.
Yeah.
But I was going to say this to me seems more like it drew on his military stuff a bit more than some of the other ones, even though they all did. Because like Jim mentioned, you want the perfection of humanity and stuff. It's sort of like when America is at war. There is no white people, black people in our country. No, it's our country versus that warring country. And this one seemed like it. And if he was really sick, it does also stand to reason that he would want to see the end or resolution of the war. That's why the Klingon peace stuff happened. And it's like, that's kind of cool.
Well, I think also this probably benefited from him being not as hands-on as the other ones because of his health. And I realize that might be a harsh thing to say, saying, well, the movie benefited from the fact that he was too sick to actually fuck it up.
Well, I would say I don't know because, as Jim mentioned, he passed away season 4 of Next Gen. The season after that, because Deep Space was at the same time, was Voyager. Yeah, it's pretty obvious why that was sucked.
Well, I note here that his hands-on involvement with Next Generation diminished greatly right after the first season. His role basically got increasingly peripheral after that. So he wasn't really involved, and it was noted here that when the Undiscovered Country came out, Nicholas Meyer was brought in to direct it. And he and Roddenberry had some creative clashes, as, again, Roddenberry felt that having the Enterprise crew hold prejudices against the Klingons did not fit with his view of the universe. And Meyer described a meeting he later regretted with Roddenberry where basically they went into a room and Roddenberry and his guys were on one side of the room and Meyer and his guys were on the other side of the room, and they basically had it out until and he regrets that because he knows Roddenberry wasn't in the best of health and he felt maybe there was a more tactful way to have done this, but because at the end of the day, Roddenberry's health was such that Nicholas Meyer was going to go out and make the movie he wanted to make regardless. He didn't really need to do that, and he kind of felt like shit afterward. But basically, it was not a meeting in which it felt I behaved very well or very diplomatically. So they basically had a screaming match, and eventually Nicholas Meyer said, "Fuck you! I'm making my movie, you crotchety old bastard."
I would also make the case he's held prejudice. They've had prejudices before.
Yep. Basically, the entirety of the original series trilogy was a buildup of Kirk and his prejudices against the Klingons.
I don't just mean that. I mean, if you watch the original series, Kirk always never. He was friends with Spock, but he still had prejudices against Vulcans.
Yep.
Because obviously Vulcans always go with their heads. Kirk always went with his heart.
Yeah. There's
which
always
was
the prejudices
highly
against like the
clever.
Klingons and the Romulans and just all the villains of the of Star Trek. There was always the crew always had prejudices there too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that might have been no offense to Roddenberry. I think that's probably one of the big factors in why this movie was so much better than the other ones because he wasn't in good enough health to fuck it up, as it were. To basically be like, no, you're not making a good movie.
Yeah.
You're making my movie. It's like, no, we're making a Star Trek movie. Fuck off.
Yep, that worked. That worked for Nemesis. Oh wait.
Yeah. However, it was noted that Roddenberry did get to see the movie 2 days before his death, and he told the producer at a private screening, and he told the producers they did a good job.
So that's good. So they at least got a seal of approval. I'm glad he was able to see it.
Indeed.
But yes. So that's it for Star Trek 6. Let's go into our final thoughts, and we'll start over there with the mole.
Like I said, this film's okay. It was pretty cool. I don't think it's the best of the original. I mean, it's overrated as we said it was. I think Wrath of Khan is probably the better one at this point.
Fair enough.
But even though the third film underdoes it, and the third and fourth film are shit, I think the second film's better. But I still like this film, and with my rating system of how I do, I'd give this a solid buy.
Fair enough. Over to the Phoenix.
Indeed. Listen, overall, I really like this movie. I felt that it was, compared to the earlier movies, much better. I felt that, like I said, I felt the pacing was a little bit better. What was going on? I felt that it drew me in more, and I care more about the plot. It felt like with some of the earlier movies, it felt like they were meandering along, and there wasn't enough plot or enough drama or enough tension to drive what was going on. Whereas this had that. I thought that's what made this better. I do like this as the best of the original 6 movies. I will agree with that. And if I had to rate this movie overall, I would probably give this movie a 7.5 to an 8 because I think it's a good movie. I like it a lot, and I would say go watch this if you're going to go watch one of the original movies. Watch Wrath of Khan 2, but watch this one definitely.
When you say Wrath of Khan 2, do you mean Wrath of Khan as well, or do you mean Into Darkness?
Aren't they the same movie, just with a British guy instead of a Hispanic guy?
You do realise that was the joke of the number 2, so the second one would be Wrath of Khan 2?
I know. That's what I was saying. But anyway, yeah. Overall, I would say check the movie out. It's a great movie. It's got a real Star Trek feel to it, more than some of the previous movies did. Speaking from my experience as someone who's mostly watched the latter series, Next Gen and DS9, and has not as of yet watched the Kirk series, so I can't tell you how that compares to that. But I from my experience of what Star Trek is, this felt more like Star Trek than the previous.
Well, you've seen the animated series, which is almost in tone with the original.
Yeah, except for the weird fucking three-legged alien in Chekhov's seat.
Hmm.
That guy's weird.
Fair enough.
Not only is that guy weird, he has the same voice as half the aliens they meet.
Fair enough. But yeah, as I said, this is my favorite of the first 6. I think Wrath of Khan is good, but I think the one thing this movie does better than Wrath of Khan, aside from, like I said, I love how they portray the characters, like all the main cast. I thought they really expanded the characters a little bit, and they really showed who the characters were more than the other movies. But the one thing that this did that held me in was the space combat in 6 was really good, and it felt like space combat, and I think that benefited from Next Gen, because I think that's one thing they took from Next Gen was how Next Gen does the space combat, whereas if you look at the original series, was all about naval combat, because that's where Roddenberry was drawing his experience from, was the Navy, so he always wanted it to basically be Navy in space, which, back in those days would work fine, and also because of technology, that's probably the best they could have done at that point. But if you think about it from the evolution of Star Trek, and just if you think about it in terms of what space what represents space combat today, Navy in space doesn't quite work because with naval combat, they don't take into account as much as you would in like space combat, the 3-dimensional, the y-axis, whereas or the z-axis, sorry. Whereas in
Well, actually, in naval combat, they do take that into consideration nowadays.
Nowadays, yeah.
Pretty much for years, even since I was a kid, because they taught me that in Sea Cadets.
Fair enough. Oh, there's everything I've ever seen of naval combat, at least back then, was kind of how, like how Wrath of Khan does the combat there, where you have the 2 subs and they completely miss each other and stuff like that. Whereas,
that's more for the drama, though.
Yeah, but you still get that drama, like with the next gen, with how they changed how the combat was shown in next gen to where it's more dynamic. It's more like fighter jets kind of thing, which I think is more accurate to how combat would be in space.
Yeah, like I said, I kind of agree. Like I said, I do like the Navy stuff in space, but I do kind of agree. The only thing I think hurt the space combat in this is the fucking effects. Oh my god, every time they showed the outside of the ship compared to the one where they were using the models, it looks hideous.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
I was like,
Yeah, the models are always going to be better, in my opinion.
However, I feel this film needed a better villain. Because like I said, Wrath of Khan was held up mainly by its villain. I mean, yeah, he was over the top as fuck, but he was a great villain for Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like why people say like The Dark Knight is better than Batman Begins. It was held up by like Joker and stuff like that. It was held up by its villain.
Mm-hmm.
This one's villain, yeah, there's a reason he's not as rememberable as Khan.
Yeah, I don't think he was a bad villain. I don't think Chang was bad. I think the problem was that Chang was more of a next-gen style villain, which doesn't work as well when you're putting him up against Kirk. You need a villain that fits the original series more. I don't think he fit the original series as much as, like, say, Khan.
Don't get me wrong. Next Gen has managed to do villains in a similar way to Khan and stuff like the Borg Queen, where it feels like a threat and it feels like a big bad. This guy, I don't know. He's not bad. He's just not memorable.
Fair enough.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, he didn't do much. He was just kind of there.
I mean, he's not as good as Khan, but he's not as shit as Doc Brown in makeup.
Yeah.
Who's too lazy to even throw himself at Kirk.
Yeah.
That fucking boulder, seriously. Boom, launches it. Why? Launching straight into Kirk, seriously.
Watch a Christopher Lloyd put in effort when nature will do it for him.
But how did he know? He didn't even try to attack him. He's a Klingon. It's like the basic nature.
Original series special effects at its finest.
It'd be like Jurassic World. How would you have felt when you watched Jurassic World, Marcus? If when the T-Rex went to fight the Indominus Rex, instead of actually fighting him, it just stood perfectly still till something else moved him towards him. No, it's nature. Fucking damn.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just going to stand here until someone bumps me with a bumper car. No, this isn't how this works.
Blue, go get him. Blue, what are you doing? Why are you just standing there? Blue just turns and looks at him.
Yeah, even Green Goblin gets off his glider. Come on.
Yeah.
Even Eggman from Sonic gets out of his things and runs before now and does something more than waiting for a rock.
Yeah. But yeah, on the whole, this movie just did a lot of things right, more things right than it did wrong, and maybe it's because Next Gen is my favorite of the series. That to me, this felt like Star Trek. But yeah, I would rate this a solid buy. And as I said before, if you're a Star Trek fan or if you've been considering watching these, get the collection. It's cheap enough now. You could probably pick up the original series collection for relatively inexpensive. But it's worth whatever you pay for it. This one is at any rate. This one and Wrath of Khan are the two I'd probably say are actually worth the price of admission. ahead.
I'd even go so far to say maybe the motion picture.
Maybe.
Just avoid 3 and 4. Avoid 3 and 4. Get 1, 2,
How about
5, and
5?
6.
You think 5? Yeah, maybe 5 as well.
5, while I don't particularly like 5,
Mhm.
like you said, if you're new to the Star Trek films, to be fair to that film, it's like the most casual of the the Star Trek films because
Yeah.
because it's more sitcom-y buddy film on Earth, so it gets you used to the characters before they're in space.
Yeah.
Because before they're always going forward because they can't find the Earth.
Hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, that was Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country.
I love the fact the second I said that, I knew Jim would sing.
Of course, it's Jim. Yes, that was Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country, the final of the original series movies. Thank you to Mole and Jim for joining me for this one.
A pleasure.
You're welcome.
And to our viewers out there, thank you for sticking with us this long, if you stuck with us this long. And join us again, like I said, for Star Trek the Animated Series on the Mole Hole. And then again, in probably about 3 or so weeks, join us for Star Trek Generations. The shittiest Kirk death ever.
I assume we're going to do... I wasn't sure if we're going to do the animated series after Generations, because Generations like week 3, and I don't think you've seen any of them yet, so you're going to probably give yourself enough time to watch them.
Not yet, but it's not that long. I could probably watch it all in like a week.
Probably, but I didn't know because it'll take you longer to watch that than it will a film.
True. Yeah, that's why I said I'd like to shoot for before Generations, but if not, we'll do it after Generations. It'll definitely be this month.
I know. I'm just saying, as the host of Mulhall, I'm aiming for after Generations.
Okay, so we'll be doing it after Generations.
It'll give people more time, especially with 4th of July weekend.
True.
And week 3 doing the film and stuff. It'll just give them more time.
Fair enough. So the next time you'll see us reconvene and talk about Trek, it'll be Generations, and then again on the Mole Hole talking about Star Trek the Animated Series.
Mm-hmm. That's all 22 episodes, folks.
Which, to be fair, like I pointed out with the animated series, Jim, have you noticed all the stuff they introduced before the films? I assume you've noticed stuff they've introduced that before the actual Star Trek live action stuff has. Possibly.
Some of it. Like I said, I've only gotten through the first 2 discs of it so far. I'm about halfway through.
Fair enough.
First,
there is loads, but fair enough.
I don't know.
The first how many, Jim?
Let's see. The last one that I watched was episode 12 of 20.
First 12 episodes. Okay, fair enough. Oh, thanks again for joining me. I've been your host, Marcus Shadow. And in space. Good night, everybody.